France 24's Catherine Norris Trent has been covering the summit for us, and a short while ago, she spoke to the Director General of the World Trade Organization. Here's Catherine.
As this summit here in Paris, this major summit looking for a new global financing pact wraps up, I am joined by the Director General of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Ngozi. First of all, I'd like to get your reaction, please, to this summit. In concrete terms, has enough been achieved, do you think?
I really do think so. Actually, maybe more has been achieved than I expected. First of all, there's a consensus on what is needed to be done. Everyone agrees that poverty, climate, food security, inequality, all these things are part of the same problem. And there's a consensus they need to be tackled, and the financing to tackle it must be put on the table. So the South, meaning developing country leaders, have also been very vocal at this conference, more than I've ever heard, in articulating that, look, they do not want to be quote-unquote helped. They want to be part of the contribution and the discussion, and they would want investment, and there are investable projects on the climate side that they would like to see supported, but they're skeptical. And they want real action after this.
And from your point of view, you're the head of the World Trade Organization. Do you feel enough has been said about trade? We've heard about debt reduction, we've heard about climate issues, global health issues. We haven't heard a great deal about trade, and yet it can, according to your organization, help to pull people out of poverty a great deal.
Absolutely. That was the point I made in my panel this morning, that missing from the conversation, most of the conversation, is trade. All of the financing can come, but if trade policies are not right, you're not going to get the impact you want. You're not going to get to net zero by 2050. Trade is part of the solution. You saw what happened during the pandemic when people had financing for vaccines, but then some countries put export restrictions. And even with all the money, you couldn't get the vaccines to where they were needed. Now, what I'm saying is we need to be careful about the trade policies. Trade can help make sure that we get to net zero by making technologies cheaper, helping to disseminate those technologies. Trade, we can also have an environmental trade agreement that lowers tariffs on renewables and other environmental goods. We can also look at subsidies. At the WTO, we are actually looking at agricultural subsidies. There are over $600 billion in agricultural subsidies, trade distorting agricultural subsidies that could be repurposed to finance for climate finance. So why don't we look at that? There are over $500 billion in fossil fuel subsidies, and we have another group of members looking at this. That could also be repurposed for climate finance. We're looking for $2.4 trillion. Already, if we did something with those two numbers, we would be over $1 trillion that could be redirected to climate finance. So at the WTO, we feel trade is fully a part of the solution.
And how worried are you about a perceived shift towards more protectionism in the West post-COVID? Things like the USA with its IRA and people Western countries looking to boost their own economies. Does that concern you at the moment?
Absolutely. I think the shift towards protectionism is worrying. I think that we have populist movements and tendencies because people have been left out of the first phase of globalization. So you have poor people in rich countries who didn't benefit, and this leads to asking to protectionist sentiments. You have poor countries that were left behind, and we're saying now, instead of thinking of more protectionism or fragmentation or decoupling, it is time to reimagine globalization and to think about using our desire to build resilience in supply chains in the world to bring in those people and those countries who were left out. So in a rich country, if there's a region that is poor and the people there have not benefited, why don't you try to incentivize supply chains to go there? Why not for them to go to poorer countries that have the right business environment? I mean, Morocco is doing well with aviation supply chain. Senegal can do so, Kenya, Nigeria. There are countries that you can go to. Bangladesh, Brazil. So this, we are calling it re-globalization. That is a better way to go than to be protectionist, than to fragment, than to think of decoupling. It goes along with what we're saying when they talk about de-risking. People ask me, what does this mean? That's what it means. Let's build better resilience by diversifying supply chains. And I must say that Chancellor Schultz nailed it during this summit when he said, look, let us diversify fertilizer supply chains. That way we build resilience for food security.
Yeah, that was in reference talking about the war in Ukraine, of course. Lastly, I just want to ask you about the proposed levy on maritime traffic, on shipping. Now, that wouldn't be monitored or installed by your organisation, but it could have a big impact, couldn't it, on global trade? Are you in favour of such a levy on maritime transport?
Well, it is. I think it's better for the International Maritime Organization. We actually have another organization that looks at these issues, and for the shipping companies themselves. I think that having more direct, transparent levies is actually better than anything indirect. So to that extent, if we are going to have a levy, something simple, direct may not be such a bad thing. The whole idea is to tax fossil fuels, to make it more expensive to use fossil fuels. I'm in favor of carbon pricing. Being an economist, I think this is one way we can both tax fossil but also raise resources, which can then be channeled to developing countries to help them have a just transition. So if those monies are levied in a transparent, direct way, and they are channeled to help developing countries be able to transit, then that helps with the just transition and climate finance.
All right, thank you. We'll have to leave it there, I'm afraid. Thank you so much indeed, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the Director General of the World Trade Organization, here at the summit on a new global financing pact in Paris.
That was France 24's Catherine Norris Trent reporting.